Republicans against the bill. The House is about to gavel in at noon to begin work on Homeland Security Department spending for the next budget year, providing about 3% less than this budget year. Members will begin offering amendments to the bill. Work on it expected to continue to tomorrow. And now to live coverage of the House here on C-SPAN.
Let us pray. Eternal God, we give you thanks for giving us another day. We pause now in your presence and acknowledge our dependence on you. We ask your blessing upon the men and women of this, the people's house. Keep them aware of your presence as they face the tasks of this day, that no burden be too heavy, no duty too difficult, and no work too wearisome. Help them, and indeed help us all to obey your law, to do your will, and to walk in your way. Grant that they might be good in thought, gracious in word, generous in deed, and great in spirit. Make this a glorious day in which all are glad to be alive, eager to work, and ready to serve you, our great nation, and all our fellow brothers and sisters. May all that is done this day be done for your greater honor and glory. Amen.
The Chair has examined the Journal of the last day's proceedings and announces to the House his approval thereof. Pursuant to Clause 1 of Rule 1, the Journal stands approved. The Pledge of Allegiance will be led by the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Sears.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The Chair will entertain up to 15 requests for 1-minute speeches on each side of the aisle. For what purpose does the gentleman from South Carolina rise? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, over 750 days have passed since the Senate passed a budget. Now liberals in Congress are leading the charge to increase the current debt limit. The federal government officially reached its $14.3 trillion debt limit in May. America's finances are now borrow, tax, and spend, killing jobs. Congress should not raise the debt limit without making serious changes in the way the federal government spends money. Recklessly raising the debt ceiling without exercising fiscal restraint will lead to a lower international credit rating, higher borrowing costs, and an increase in the cost of the nation's imports. This is a threat to senior citizens by risking the value of the dollar. It's a threat to young people, saddling them with overwhelming debt. Washington must change its way, which is now killing jobs. In conclusion, God bless our troops, and we will never forget September 11th and the global war on terrorism.
What purpose does the gentleman from North Carolina rise?
I ask permission to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to pay tribute to Dennison Dover Garrett, a towering giant who has passed away at the age of 97. A lifelong resident of Greenville, North Carolina, we affectionately refer to Mr. Garrett by his initials, Dede. Dede Garrett was a man of great courage who led by example. He worked tirelessly to ensure that the African-American community had a voice in public policy. Through his work in the AME Zion Church and the Pitt County branch of the NAACP, Dede constantly exposed injustice. He insisted that the American dream must be a reality to every American regardless of their station in life. As the first African-American county commissioner, Dede led the way in African-American political participation in his community. As the founder of a substantial insurance and real estate firm, Dede was a successful businessman and mentor to many. Mr. Speaker, I ask my colleagues to join me in recognizing this great life. We extend condolences to his wife, Mrs. Clotilde Williams Garrett, and their sons, Dede Jr. and Michael, and the entire Greenville community. Greenville, North Carolina is a better place to live and work because of the enormous contribution of Dennison D. Garrett. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back.
What purpose does the gentleman from Ohio rise? Without objection. The gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, the economy, the national debt, high gas prices, and the need for jobs, those are still the important issues to the people in my district in southeastern Ohio. But today, I rise to congratulate the Marietta baseball team for winning their record 5th Division III College World Series title yesterday. Our people have something to cheer about. The Pioneers, led by Coach Brian Brewer, won the deciding game in convincing fashion with an 18-5 victory over Chapman University. The Dede Express was led defensively by strong pitching performance from All-American honorable mention pitcher Austin Blaskey. Blaskey pitched a nearly perfect 6 innings, allowing only 2 hits and 1 earned run. On the offensive side, the Pioneers were led by right fielder Aaron Hopper, who had 4 hits, 4 RBIs, and a stolen base. All-American senior center fielder John Snyder added 3 hits, 2 runs scored, and an RBI to end his college career. The Pioneers finished the season with an amazing record of 47 wins and 4 losses, on their way to a record 5th national title. Congratulations to the Dede Express. I yield back the balance of my time.
Now, what purpose does the gentleman from Rhode Island is recognized? The gentleman's recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to recognize Mike Conley, an educator of the Charles E. Shea Senior High School in Pawtucket, Rhode Island, for his leadership in launching the Voters in the Classroom initiative. Voters in the Classroom is a statewide mock election initiative involving nearly 25% of public high schools across the state of Rhode Island. Mr. Conley's Voter in the Classroom initiative is an effective classroom-based program helping to prepare students to be engaged public citizens. Students in the Voters in the Classroom program participate in mock statewide referendums on important topics, establish voting procedures through classroom discussions and assemblies, and staff polling places at their schools. I recently visited the students and educators at Shea High School and have seen firsthand the importance of this program. Civic education programs like this are key to the success of our democracy because they increase the likelihood that young people will engage in the election process when they become of age. I congratulate Mike Conley on this achievement and thank him for his forward-thinking commitment to Rhode Island students and the preservation of our democracy. I yield back the balance of my time.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas rise? The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, since this president's taken office, we've had failed stimulus, omnibus, TARP 2, government motors, government takeover of health care. Well, the buck stops here. Literally, House Republicans refuse to give the spender-in-chief a blank check to pay for his reckless ways. If the president even wants to think about moving forward with a debt limit increase, he needs to know Americans want Congress to drastically cut spending. Across the nation, people have cut back, stretched their hard-earned dollars in order to make it through these tough times. The government must do the same. We're facing a debt crisis because Washington spends too much and wastes too much. Raising the debt limit without a deep spending cut amounts to a Barack Obama big government bailout. Enough is enough. Stop the Obama bailout now. Yield back.
The gentleman yields. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from California or from Texas arise? Gentlewoman is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Before I comment on why I'm standing next to the brave and the true of our United States military, let me give a message to Syria and express my outrage of the heinous killing of a 13-year-old boy. President Assad should be held accountable now, and the United Nations needs to voice its opposition. As the Secretary of State has indicated, we need to be standing alongside of those seeking freedom. And to our allies in Bahrain, where our fleet of Navy personnel are, what a disgrace that they have imploded and blown up mosques because they disagree with their particular faith. This is the Arab Spring, but it will end in dryness if we don't stand for truth and human rights and compassion. Now, Mr. Speaker, I think it is important as I stand next to the brave men and women, some who have fallen, but those who now still fight. I ask my Republican friends, do you understand that there is a 10% unemployment? among those who are coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan. Yes, troops who are fighting for us and fighting on our behalf. And yet, it has been 21 weeks since there's been a no-jobs agenda. We need jobs, create jobs. If you believe in these troops, build jobs for the American people. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas arise?
Request permission to address the House for 1 minute.
The gentleman's recognized.
Mr. Speaker, the more we learn about Pakistan, the more they sound like the Benedict Arnold nation in the list of countries we call allies. First, it was Osama bin Laden, the world's #1 outlaw, living comfortably in a mansion in Pakistan for years, but Pakistan claims no knowledge of that. Now, a reporter in Pakistan, Saeed Salam Shahzad, has been murdered. He has been critical of the Pakistani government. He reported that the naval base in Karachi that was attacked was done so by al-Qaeda members of the Navy of Pakistan. Human Rights Watch says Shahzad was assassinated by members of the Pakistan Intelligence Agency, who previously had threatened to kill him. Meanwhile, Pakistan is chumming up to the Chinese. Sounds like Pakistan is playing both sides in the war on terror. 7 in 10 Americans believe we need to stop or decrease foreign aid to Pakistan. We should stop foreign aid to Pakistan until we know whose side they're on. We don't need to pay them to be unfaithful. They will do it for free. And that's just the way it is.
For what purpose does the gentleman from California arise? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, after a lifetime of service to their families and our nation, American seniors deserve the security of basic safety net like Medicare and Social Security. Sadly, the Republican budget that the House approved in April puts the fundamental programs at risk. The Republican budget will end guaranteed Medicare coverage for seniors. I state, end guaranteed Medicare coverage for seniors. Cut benefits and turn control over to the insurance industry. Double out-of-pocket costs for seniors over the next decade. From day one, the Republican plan to end Medicare will toss 4 million seniors into the prescription drug donut hole. And from day one, the seniors across the nation will have a co-pays reinstated for their annual wellness visit. Seniors in my district understand that we must lower the deficit, but it should not be on the back of the poor or disadvantaged. But they also know that it is wrong to end Medicare, so we can extend the tax breaks for the millionaires and billionaires. Let's work together on a real budget and lower the deficit. I yield back the balance of my time.
What purpose does the gentleman from Mississippi rise? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At 2:35 a.m., Endeavour landed safely following its final trip into space. As Endeavour retires after its 25th mission, it lives on with a unique legacy, the only space shuttle named by children. In 1989, Senatobia, Mississippi Middle School was the national winner in a competition to name a new spacecraft. Their mission? To come up with a name that captured the spirit of America's mission in space. On May 16th, 2 decades later, as Endeavour launched its final mission, those elementary children are now adults, and the spirit of that excitement of that final flight was felt most in Senatobia, Mississippi. As the Senatobia 1, a balloon filled and flown by students, built and flown by students, was launched, filled with signatures wishing Congressman Giffords a speedy recovery and capturing the beautiful images of their beloved spaceship as it took to the skies for one last time. Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back his time. What purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey rise? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, last night we saw once again a great display of political theater. My friends across the aisle scheduled a vote on raising the nation's debt limit, knowing that it would fail. The vote occurred specifically after the stock market closed because they knew the harsh effect that this game could have on the market. This was simply an effort to distract the public away from the disastrous attempt to end Medicare as we know it. Under their plan, from day one, seniors will see an increase in the cost of prescription drugs and preventive health care. They no longer want to discuss the vote they took to end Medicare and force seniors to pay more for less. We all agree that smart, responsible budget cuts are needed. That is why Democrats and Republicans from the House, the Senate, and the administration are working together on a plan. We should allow the negotiators to continue their work in good faith with open discussion on the future of our economy and how to decrease our deficit. Mr. Speaker, now is not the time to play games with the American public. We must focus on creating jobs, jobs, and more jobs, and move our economy forward.
Gentleman's time has expired. What purpose does the gentleman from Kansas rise?
Speaker, I ask permission to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to pay tribute to a former congressman from Kansas's 3rd Congressional District who recently passed. Robert F. Ellsworth served Kansas in the United States Congress for 3 terms during the 1960s. He was a proud Jayhawk graduating from the University of Kansas, and he served our country admirably in both World War II and the Korean War as an officer in the United States Navy. He was known as a candid and independent-minded legislator during his tenure in Congress. A personal advisor to President Richard Nixon and a confidant of Kansas Senator Bob Dole, he also served as an ambassador to NATO and as the Deputy Secretary of Defense under President Gerald Ford. After leaving politics, he founded Hamilton BioVentures, a company focusing on investment in emerging life science technologies. He is survived by his wife Eleanor and children William and Ann, as well as stepchildren John, Sarah, and William. My heart and the heart of the 3rd District is with him and his family during this difficult time.
Gentleman's time has expired. What purpose does the gentleman from the Mariana Islands rise? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, it's getting ridiculous. That's what Saipan Chamber of Commerce President Doug Brennan said about the Department of Homeland Security's failure to issue regulations implementing federal immigration in the Northern Mariana Islands. And I agree. It is getting ridiculous. 3 years since the law was enacted, 18 months since it took effect, 2 oversight hearings, letters from congressional leaders, meeting after meeting, and still no regulations. Workers don't know what their status will be 5 months from now. Businesses can't plan for the future. It's putting the brakes on the economy, the Chamber President says. And what does DHS say? The regulations will be released when the regulations are released. There's no way for a federal agency to fulfill its responsibilities. We'll get to it when we get to it. Federal immigration was supposed to benefit the Marianas, improve the economy. Instead, it's making things worse. And we think about funding Homeland Security today. Homeland Security should be explaining why it isn't doing its job, issuing these long overdue regulations for the Northern Mariana Islands. And I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman's time has expired. What purpose does the gentleman from Missouri rise? Without objection, the gentleman from Missouri is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last night, our Republican colleagues scheduled an empty vote on the debt ceiling, a political stunt with no serious plan. Last week, the majority leader tried to use a natural disaster as political leverage in their ideological fight over the budget. And last month, and again today, Republicans propose ending Medicare as we know it to pay for tax giveaways for millionaires and giant oil companies. I'm holding another town hall meeting tomorrow, a telephone town hall with my constituents to talk about these issues and what our national priorities should be. The Republican extreme ideological war is a disturbing trend, using national emergencies, the full faith and credit of the United States and our seniors' health care as if they're bargaining chips. The American people and the Missourians I represent deserve better. It's time we come together like adults to find serious solutions to our complex problems, and it's time to stop threatening Medicare, important institutions, our national credit, and the national commitment to lend a hand to those in need, and especially those suffering through natural disasters. We can solve this without trying to scare markets or scare seniors. Let's get serious about reducing our deficit and growing jobs. I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. What purpose does the gentleman from Colorado rise?
For permission to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentleman from Colorado is recognized for 1 minute.
Good afternoon, Mr. Speaker. And listening to some of the Republicans that were speaking here earlier today, they want to blame Medicare, early childhood education, grants to firefighters for the debt that we have, when everybody knows that at the end of the Clinton administration, this country was running a surplus. Then we had Bush tax cuts. That's about $1 trillion. Then we have a couple wars. That's $1 trillion. Then there's a collapse on Wall Street under the Bush administration. That's $2 trillion. That'll turn anybody's budget upside down. But the Republicans want to take it out of Medicare. They want to dismantle Medicare. They've never liked Medicare to begin with because it really works for middle America, for our seniors. We can't let that happen. We cannot allow them to dismantle Medicare just because of these other things. They want to protect millionaires, billionaires, and oil companies. We're not going to let them do that. And with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back his time. What purpose does the gentleman from Kentucky rise?
Request permission to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, we've heard a lot in the media about the political Tea Party. Well, you know, there's another kind of Tea Party. That's where children play with their imaginary friends. And we saw an example of that kind of imagination last night in this chamber. We saw Republicans bring a bill to the floor and then vote to defeat it, not to raise the debt ceiling, in spite of the fact that they passed a budget that will raise the national debt by $8 trillion over the next 10 years. They imagine that that $8 trillion will magically disappear. Another example of their vivid imagination is believing that the American people will sit back while they end Medicare, turn over seniors' health insurance or health care to insurance companies and ask them to pay up to 70% of the cost of their health care. This is not an imaginary world. These are real people with real problems, and the American people are not going to sit back while the Republican Party plays with their imaginary friends. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back his time. What purpose does the gentleman from Tennessee rise?
Address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentleman from Tennessee is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On Sunday, the New York Times editorially commended bills that give people an opportunity to get jobs without have credit checks run on them. In this country today, credit checks are run on almost 65% of all job applicants and sometimes are used to deny people jobs. The fact is, even the industry lobbyist said in Oregon last year that credit checks have no correlation to fraud in the workplace or a person's ability to perform a job. Yet because of the credit industry, credit checks are still required. We have a bill in Congress, the Equal Employment for All bill, that would outlaw such a practice. 5 states have outlawed such a practice, and 20 states are considering it. We need to create jobs and give everybody a chance. Many people have bad credit because of this economy, because of the recession, because of health care costs that have almost forced them into bankruptcy or divorces. They should not be denied the chance to have a job, a second chance. We should pass the Equal Employment for All bill and give all Americans a chance for employment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. What purpose does the gentleman from Michigan rise? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Americans are at risk. They're at risk of having their homes and their businesses demolished, of being injured and even killed, either by a natural disaster such as the tornadoes that have hit us recently or through a terrorist attack that are more likely come from within the United States. This is not the time to cut the Homeland Security budget. And that's why today I propose taking military aid to Afghanistan and redirecting it to better equip and to hire more firefighters, more police officers, more emergency medical providers, because our state and local governments, they don't have the money to do that because our home values have plummeted because of foreclosures that this Congress failed to address effectively. There's one responsibility, though, that this Congress must honor, our duty to protect the American people. We deserve, those of us that live in this country, we deserve to be safe, restore the cuts to the Homeland Security budget, redirect the money from Afghanistan to protect Americans. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back his time. Chair lays before the House the following enrolled bill. Clerk will read the bill.
Senate 1082, an act to provide for an additional temporary extension of programs under the Small Business Act and the Small Business Investment Act of 1958 and for other purposes.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from California rise? The gentlewoman from California is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to condemn yes, condemn, the government of Vietnam for continuing its appalling human rights record by conducting unjust sham trials of 7 citizens who asked for land reform. This past week, the People's Court of Bentry unfairly convicted 7 land rights activists to years of imprisonment and probation. Ms. Tran Thi Tree was convicted to 8 years. Pastor Dung Kim Kai was imprisoned for 6 years. And Mr. Pham Van Trong received a 7-year sentence simply for asking for their land back from the communist government of Vietnam. This recent trial was no different than Vietnam's past trials, where there's no due process. I hope that my colleagues will look at the record of human rights with respect to Vietnam and join me in urging the government of Vietnam to drop false charges. Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentlewoman yields back her time. What purpose does the gentleman from Minnesota rise? Without objection, the gentleman from Minnesota is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I represent Minneapolis, Minnesota, and recently my district was hit by a tornado. That tornado caused damage to well over 535 houses and took the lives of 2 of my constituents. And I just want to commend all those people who stepped forward to do the right thing for the people who were victims, whether you were serving meals for people who were put out of their homes, whether you were making games for the children of the dispossessed to be able to have some joy in their lives after such a difficult period, or whether you were an emergency responder, police, fire, emergency medical, or whether you were a member of our local government. I want everyone in my district to know, everyone in the 5th Congressional District to know that I'm so proud of the work that you did. I want folks to know that it is times of crisis like this tornado, in which the best of us comes out. When we find our charitable spirit, when we find our courage, when we find all those things that sometimes are lacking in everyday life. And I want to let you know that on the faces of the children who had a warm place to stay after their own homes were knocked to the ground and trees went through people's roofs, that I want to thank all those first responders, all those public servants, all those volunteers who stepped up and made a very difficult situation just a little bit better for everyone who was involved. And of course, Mr. Speaker, we can never forget those 2 citizens who lost their lives when they were hit by this tornado. It was a tragedy for them and their families, and we will keep them in our thoughts and in our hearts and in our minds as we move forward. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back his time. What purpose does the gentleman from Florida rise? Without objection, the gentleman from Florida is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the partisan debt resolution was dead on arrival yesterday. But what really should have been DOA is the Republican plan to end Medicare and turn seniors over to private insurance companies. Today, despite the outright rejection of this plan from South Florida to Western New York and all across America, Republicans will try to deem and pass the reckless Ryan budget. That's right. Those who decried deem and pass during the health care reform debate now seek to use it to end Medicare. In fact, it was the distinguished chairman of the Rules Committee who, in an effort to stoke fear over the Affordable Care Act, derisively labeled deem and pass the slaughter solution. Apparently using deem and pass to help insure 50 million uninsured Americans is an abomination, but using it to end Medicare, that's courageous. What would truly be courageous is if my Republican colleagues abandoned their plan to gut Medicare and Medicaid and instead supported deficit reduction that ends giveaway to big oil and more $100,000 tax cuts for millionaires. Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back his time. What purpose does the gentlewoman from Illinois rise?
To adjust the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentlewoman from Illinois is recognized for 1 minute.
Last night's vote on raising the debt ceiling is further proof that the Republican majority plans to hold the full faith and credit of the United States hostage while they demand as ransom extreme cuts to Medicare and Medicaid. Newsflash,
The American people simply won't sacrifice Medicare and Medicaid and the guaranteed benefits they provide. Seniors across the country are speaking out. Hands off Medicare and don't slash Medicaid's health and long-term care benefits to pay for tax breaks to millionaires and billionaires, big oil, and companies that offshore jobs. Unlike the Republicans, Democrats are serious about responsible and real deficit reduction. The Republican plan actually increases unemployment and the deficit, ends Medicare, further erodes our middle class, hurts poor children, all to increase the fortunes of oil companies and millionaires and billionaires. This is a plan that goes against the majority of Americans, and we won't have it.
What purpose does the gentleman from New York rise?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today, Mr. Speaker, by the direction of the Committee on Rules. I call up House Resolution 287 and ask for its immediate consideration.
The clerk will report the resolution.
House Calendar Number 42, House Resolution 287. Resolved that at any time after the adoption of this resolution, the Speaker may, pursuant to Clause 2B of Rule 18, declare the House resolved into the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union for consideration of the bill, H.R. 2017, making appropriations for the Department of Homeland Security for the fiscal year ending September 30th, 2012, and for other purposes. The bill shall be dispensed with. All points of order against consideration of the bill are waived. General debate shall be confined to the bill and shall not exceed 1 hour, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Appropriations. After general debate, the bill shall be considered for amendment under the 5-minute rule. Points of order against provisions in the bill for failure to comply with Clause 2 of Rule 21 are waived, except for Section 536. During consideration of the bill for amendment, the chair of the Committee of the Whole may accord priority and recognition on the basis of whether the member offering an amendment has caused it to be printed in the portion of the congressional record designated for that purpose in Clause 8 of Rule 18. Amendments so printed shall be considered as read. When the committee rises and reports the bill back to the House with a recommendation that the bill do pass, the previous question shall be considered as ordered on the bill, and amendments thereto to final passage without intervening motion except one motion to recommit with or without instructions. Section 2A, pending the adoption of a concurrent resolution on the budget for fiscal year 2012, the provisions of House Concurrent Resolution 34, as adopted by the House, shall have force and effect with the modification specified in subsection C, and the House as though Congress has adopted such concurrent resolution. The allocations printed in the report of the Committee on Rules accompanying this resolution shall be considered for all purposes in the House to be the allocations under Section 302A of the Congressional Budget Act of 1974 for the concurrent resolution on the budget for fiscal year 2012. B. The chair of the Committee on the Budget shall adjust the allocations referred to in subsection A to accommodate the enactment of general or continuing appropriation acts for fiscal year 2011 after the adoption of House Concurrent Resolution 34, but before the adoption of this resolution. C. For provisions making appropriations for fiscal year 2011, Section 3C of House Resolution 5 shall have force and effect through September 30th, 2011.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Minnesota rise?
Mr. Speaker, I raise a point of order against H.Res. 287 because the resolution violates Section 426A of the Congressional Budget Act. The resolution contains a waiver of all points of order against consideration of the bill, which includes a waiver of Section 425 of the Congressional Budget Act, which causes a violation of Section 426A.
The gentleman from Minnesota makes a point of order that the resolution violates Section 426A of the Congressional Budget Act of 1974. The gentleman has met the threshold burden under the rule, and the gentleman from Minnesota and a member opposed each will control 10 minutes of debate on the question of consideration. Following debate, the Chair will put the question of consideration as the statutory means of disposing of the point of order. The gentleman from Minnesota is recognized.
Mr. Chair, the Chair recognizes me. Mr. Speaker, I have a point of order I'd like to raise with you at this time. The point of order is not necessarily out of concern for unfunded mandates, although there are likely some in the underlying bill, H.R. 2017, because the bill slashes funding for our state and local governments as they prepare against homeland security threats and respond to natural disasters. Before I begin, Mr. Speaker, I have a parliamentary inquiry.
The gentleman will state the parliamentary inquiry.
The rule states, quote, House Concurrent Resolution 34, as adopted by the House, shall have the force and effect in the House as though Congress had adopted such concurrent resolution, unquote. Does this mean that the rule deems that the Senate will have passed H-Con Res 34?
The content of the rule will be subject to debate. The gentleman from Minnesota is recognized.
I have a further parliamentary inquiry. Mr. Speaker, state
the inquiry.
So voting yes on the rule is voting yes for H-Con Res 34, the Ryan budget, which ends Medicare. Is that right?
The gentleman from Minnesota is making a point for debate. The gentleman is recognized.
Further parliamentary inquiry.
State the inquiry.
Mr. Speaker, doesn't the Ryan budget end Medicare as we know it?
The gentleman from Minnesota is not stating a proper parliamentary inquiry. The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I raise this point of order because I think it's important to discover whether or not the underlying rule for the Homeland Security Appropriations bill also deems the Republican plan to end Medicare as we know it. It's the only vehicle we've got to actually talk about this rule and this bill and how we are being denied the ability to actually offer amendments that we would like to illuminate what's actually happening in this bill. Mr. Speaker, we have a responsibility to address our deficit. By cutting a lifeline for our seniors, it's not an act of courage. It's actually cowardly. Claiming to reduce the budget deficit on the backs of Americans who have paid into their retirement their entire lives not only harms American seniors, but goes against the basic values of fairness and security that Americans cherish. Medicare guarantees a healthy and secure retirement for Americans who pay into it their whole lives. It represents the basic American values of fairness and respect for those seniors that we Americans cherish. Siding with lobbyists to give insurance company bureaucrats control of Medicare does nothing to address the deficit, but it does a great deal to reduce health care for our seniors. Let's put America back to work, and let's reject the rule and the underlying bill by voting no on this motion to reconsider. I yield time now in 2 minutes to Mr. Cicilline of the great state of Rhode Island.
The gentleman from Rhode Island is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, and I thank the gentleman for yielding. I rise today in opposition to this rule, which allows for debate on fiscal year 2012 Homeland Security Appropriations. This bill makes dangerous cuts to the Urban Areas Security Initiative, or UASI, a program critical to the security of our country's urban areas that have been deemed at high risk of terrorist attacks. One of those urban areas is Providence, Rhode Island, in my congressional district, along with many other communities. Just last year, the Greater Providence area was one of 64 cities that was identified either because of their capital or their critical assets or their geography as being areas at most risk of being targeted by terrorists. As a result of those designations, Providence has been receiving critical funding from the federal government under the UASI program to support efforts to prevent and respond to terrorist attacks and other emergencies. And Providence, under leadership of Colonel Pete Gaynor, became the first city in America to become fully accredited its Department of Emergency Management and Homeland Security. However, the funding cuts to UASI that are contained in this bill will cripple the ability of key urban areas like Providence to effectively ensure public safety should a terrorist attack occur. How? The loss of funds will hinder the ability of Providence and other communities to address cyber terrorism, to communicate with first responders in an emergency, among many other critical emergency functions. Mr. Speaker, our nation's defense must come first. We cannot, in good conscience, spend billions of dollars protecting people all over the world at the expense of our own national security. I urge my colleagues to vote in favor of restoring funding for the Urban Areas Security Initiative and against this rule. I yield back, and I thank the gentleman for the time.
The gentleman yields his time. The gentleman from Minnesota, Mr. Ellison, reserves.
I will yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from California.
The gentleman from California is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Ellison, and thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the assault on the well-being and the health care of America never end? Look over the last 5 months what's happened here, and this bill taking it one more step. First, the repeal of the Affordable Health Care Act with provisions in it to protect Americans from the rapacious appetite of the health insurance companies, providing protections. The Republicans would repeal that. And then the next step, which we saw just recently in the Republican budget, the termination of Medicare for those who are under 55 years of age. What are they to do? And for those who are already on Medicare, a significant, serious reduction in the Medicaid program that provides essential funding for those seniors in nursing homes. Will the assault never end? And here in this bill, to protect the American homeland, a deeming of the Republican budget which clearly terminates Medicare? Is it never going to end? Are we never going to step forward to actually put in place legislation that will assist Americans to get the health care that they need? Step one, way back. Repeal the Affordable Health Care Act. Give unranged opportunity to the insurance companies to go after men and women in this nation. Terminating Medicare, and here once again coming back in a Homeland Security bill, slipping in by sleight of hand a repeal once again of health care. And by the way, how's it going to be paid for? Well, you're going to take it out of the seniors' pockets, but you're not going to go after the oil companies? Come on now. The oil companies, the richest industry in the world, not paying their fair share and at the same time getting subsidies from the American taxpayers. It's time for that to end. There are ways to pay for the deficit and bring it down. One of the ways not to do it is to go after seniors.
Mr. Speaker, may I inquire how much time remains for our side?
The gentleman from Minnesota has 4 1/4 minutes remaining.
We'll reserve at this time.
Gentleman from Minnesota, Mr. Ellison, reserves his time. The gentleman from New York is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the question before the House is, should the House now consider House Resolution 287? While the resolution waives all points of order against consideration of the bill, the committee is not aware of any points of order. The waiver is prophylactic in nature. Specifically, the Committee on Rules is not aware of any violation of the Unfunded Mandates Reform Act, nor has the Congressional Budget Office notified the Rules Committee of any violation of the Act. Additionally, the open rule before the House today allows any member of Congress to amend or strike any provision of the bill, which is the ultimate fail-safe. In order to allow the House to continue its scheduled business for the day, I urge members to vote yes on the question of consideration of the resolution. With that, I will reserve the balance of our time.
Mr. Reed, the gentleman from New York reserves his time. The gentleman from Minnesota, Mr. Ellison, is recognized.
At this time, Mr. Speaker, we recognize Jan Schakowsky of Illinois for 2 minutes.
The gentlewoman from Illinois is recognized for 2 minutes.
You know, there's a lot of talk and legalese about what's going on today, but the reality is what the Republicans are trying to do underneath all of that legalese language is to enshrine in law the Republican Ryan budget by voting for it, voting for the rule. What you do is to put into force that budget. And what does that budget do? It ends Medicare. Now, you know, there are people who resent that term, that, oh no, we're really going to save it. Well, I want to tell you, when you take away the guaranteed benefits of Medicare, that's what seniors get right now. For people 55 and under, They are thrown into the not-so-loving arms of the insurance companies, and their costs will increase out of their own pockets by about $6,000. That's what the bill does. The bill also turns Medicaid, which is not only the health care plan for poor children in the United States, but it is also the largest payer for nursing homes and home health care. That's the biggest single part of Medicaid, is paying for nursing home care and home health care. So another slap at the seniors. The other thing that the legislation does is to offer more tax breaks for the wealthiest Americans, lower the tax rates for corporations, many of whom aren't even paying any taxes right now, a couple of whom got tax refunds from the government. You've got major companies paying less taxes than ordinary Americans. That's what this does.
Time has expired. We'll yield the lady additional 15 seconds.
The gentlewoman's recognized for 15 seconds.
The American people aren't stupid. They will understand that this is another doubling down on cutting Medicare. It will be apparent by the end of this day. And I yield back.
Gentlewoman from Illinois yields back. The gentleman from Minnesota.
Mr. Speaker, I can reserve.
The gentleman reserves his time. The gentleman from New York, Mr. Reed, is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'll reserve the balance of our time.
They reserve. The gentleman from Minnesota.
Mr. Speaker, we should be creating jobs, not destroying Medicare. We should be preserving what has made America great, which is a basic sense that we're all in this thing together. Yes, it's absolutely true. People should go out into the private sector, try their luck in the free market, skill, ingenuity, all that. But America has always had a strong public sector, which has been essential to the survival and the success of that private sector. Fair rules, good infrastructure, good jobs. Times where America, like during the Depression, like during the time that Eisenhower led us to build and create the infrastructure, and in 1968, when we created Medicare, this country has been at its best. Yes, a private sector, but also a strong, vibrant public sector. We are at a point in American history today where at least the Republican caucus believes we don't need a public sector. We just don't need one. We may need one maybe for military stuff, but beyond that, they just don't see a purpose for it. I think Americans think that things like Medicare, infrastructure development, Social Security, things like the GI Bill are important parts of what makes America America. Because it is how we recognize as Americans that we are all in this thing together, that our senior citizens will not be abandoned, that our GIs coming back will not be left behind, that communities who need police, fire, and EMT services will not just be left to the ravages of others. We need an American commitment to Social Security and Medicare, and that's what we're going to be arguing for today. The American people can count on the Democratic caucus to never abandon our seniors, even as Republicans want to take Medicare apart as a program that has served so many people so well. You want to do something to change Medicare? Why don't we let Medicare negotiate drug prices? That could probably save us several $billion a year, as many as $53 billion a year. Republicans don't want to do that because they got their interests to protect, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Minnesota yields back the remainder of his time. The gentleman from New York, Mr. Reed, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will note that each of the comments that have been offered from the other side are not relevant to the point of order, but in response to the comments that have been tendered by my colleagues from the other side of the aisle, I would say the Republicans are not here to destroy Medicare. They are here to save Medicare. We have put forth a responsible plan that has been put openly and continuously debated in the public forum and in this chamber about how we're going to move forward with a problem that we have in Medicare. It's a problem we cannot deny. Both sides of the aisle know that Medicare is on a path to bankruptcy. We have put forth a plan. We have put forth a plan that guarantees that we can deal with the problem in such a way that those that are on Medicare are not impacted, and those within a generation of retiring into Medicare are not impacted. But yet we want to be villainized by the other side for allegedly throwing grandma off the cliff for taking away Medicare. That is not being honest with the American public. We will be honest with the American public. We recognize the problem in Medicare. We put forth a plan. My colleagues on the other side of the aisle have not put forth a plan to deal with the problem. They want to engage in electioneering, politicking, looking at the re-election efforts for 2012. Well, we're here as members of this caucus and as members of this body to deal with the problems of America in an honest and open fashion, and that's what we will do. The House-passed budget guarantees that seniors will have coverage that is affordable. The House-passed budget guarantees seniors will be able to find a plan. It does not end Medicare as we know it. It does not throw our seniors off the cliff. It is a responsible plan that leads us to a situation that deals with the problem of Medicare that is a known problem, and if we want to continue to live in denial and not be honest with the American public, then I tell the American people, follow the Democratic proposal of engaging in name-calling rather than sitting down and engaging in problem-solving. That's what we're about. At this point in time, I would urge my colleagues to continue the consideration of the underlying rule and reject this point of order.
Yields back his time.
I do yield back the balance of my time.
All time for debate has expired. The question is, will the House now consider the resolution? Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it.
All the yeas and the nays?
The yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote on the yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 15-minute vote.
So we have the House holding its first vote of the day, members working on Homeland Security Department spending for next budget year. The proposal itself is for 3% less than this budget year. This is a procedural vote on the rule, which provides for an hour of general debate and unlimited germane amendments. We expect members to work through general debate and continue working on amendments tomorrow. So this is one vote this time, 15 minutes. One item we've been anticipating in the House was debate over the War Powers Act and a bill crafted by Congressman Kucinich of Ohio to end the war in Libya. Well, we learned today that that resolution, H-Con Resolution 51, was pulled from the floor calendar. Congressman Kucinich responded with this statement. I'll read a portion. He says, in part, the House leadership has communicated to me via email that the vote on Libya will be postponed in an effort to compel more information and consultation from the administration. I've been asked to provide input for the information which the House will seek from the administration. It's clear that the administration violated Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, which reserves to Congress the power to declare war. It is clear that the administration is in violation of the War Powers Act, which, within a 60-day period, requires the President to terminate military action or seek authorization from Congress to continue the military action. Congress needs to act to defend the Constitution and the statute. And he concludes, I look forward to the time when we will debate House Concurrent Resolution 51 and the constitutional and statutory issues surrounding the war power. We will keep you posted on whether this bill gets re-added to the House agenda. Well, of course, much talk today about the House vote yesterday on raising the federal debt ceiling. Republicans and Democrats voted against the measure. It failed 97 to 318. President Obama today spoke with the House Republican caucus and touched on the debt ceiling and the federal budget, along with a number of domestic issues. Democrats will meet with the president tomorrow. Federal financial issues were also the subject of discussion on this morning's Washington Journal.
We're back with Congressman Phil Gingrich, Republican of Georgia. 11th District represents Marietta Rome Carlton, Republican Study Committee member as well. Let me begin with the New York Times. They have a quote in the paper about last night's debt ceiling vote from Senator Mark Warner. And he says this, the thing that people are missing is that in shutting down the government, you can go to the 11th and a half hour, referring to an earlier vote. And the consequences of not doing it, while significant, are not economy threatening, Mr. Warner said. You can't go to the 11th and a half hour on the debt limit. You don't know what's going to spook the bond markets.
Well, that may be true. But of course, the date that Secretary Guyton continues to give the Congress continues to change. The latest, of course, is August the 2nd. It may change again. but certainly revenue continues to come in. We continue to tax the American taxpayer, and revenue comes in on a daily basis, over $200 billion a day, in fact. And certainly the interest on the debt would be the #1 priority. The defense of the nation, maybe the #2 priority. The safety net program for our seniors, such as Social Security and Medicaid, could be 3 and 4. And you pay these things, and you finally get down into the bottom of the hat and maybe put off paying other obligations. But, I mean, this business of Armageddon and drop dead and everything goes to heck in a handbasket at a date certain, August the 2nd. I just don't believe that's true, and I don't think most members of Congress believe that's true.
Do you ever think, what if I'm wrong?
Of course we do. Absolutely. I think about that a lot, and there's a possibility that we could be wrong. Is it worth the risk? Well, I think it is worth the risk because, quite honestly, I think a more irresponsible thing than not raising the debt ceiling or than raising the debt ceiling would be to say to raise it without having any budget process reform, to just simply say, okay, once again, for the umpteenth time, we're going to go along with the federal government, with this president, with this Treasury Secretary, and accept lock, stock, and barrel what they say and all the doomsday scenario that is in fact correct, and we're going to go ahead and raise the debt ceiling and hope in the future that we'll have some budget process reform. But the American people don't want that. I think they truly don't want to continue down this road of 14+ trillion, maybe 16 trillion after we raise the debt limit without a significant commitment, not just a hope and a promise, but into law what we're going to do about reducing spending and overall cutting down the debt.
Of these bipartisan talks that are going on with Vice President Joe Biden, what do you see, what do you want to come out of that so that you're a yes vote to raise the debt ceiling in the future? Well,
we've talked about a number of scenarios, and of course the idea of having a balanced budget amendment is one that has been proffered. I would love to see that. I think the likelihood of that, though, is not very strong because, quite honestly, there are many states that that may not want a balanced budget amendment, particularly if they get a larger share of government, federal government largesse, into their state coffers. And it takes 3/4, 2/3 majority in the House and the Senate and 3/4 of the states in a 7-year period of time. I don't think we have time to wait for that. I think, though, to say that we will have caps on spending as a percent of GDP, bringing it back down to 18%, set that into law and have a trigger that makes us cut spending if we go above that amount. There are other things I feel quite personally that why should we vote to raise the debt ceiling until each fiscal year we have passed every one of the 12 spending bills and we have a budget, a concurrent budget resolution passed by the House and the Senate? How are you going to know how much money you need to borrow if you have no budget and you have not passed your spending bills? So I would say to the Vice President and to the President, to get my vote, I want to see that done every year. I do not want to see spending bills lumped together, this so-called omnibus stuff of putting, let's say, MILCON, Veterans Administration, or the Department of Defense Appropriations spending bill lumped with some other controversial, discretionary, socialistic type spending to get members, force members to vote in those situations. I think every single bill, spending bill, should be a standalone bill. That would be another provision that I would put in there before I would vote to increase the debt ceiling.
Medicare cuts?
Medicare cuts, I think, are significant if we don't do something about Medicare. The trustees' report this year says that by 2024, the Part A trust fund will be insolvent. 2024 is not that far away. And the President himself, back in 2009, I think June, he said, well, you know, the two biggest drivers of our debt and deficit are the Medicare and Medicaid programs, and they're not sustainable. And yet all the President and the Democratic majority seem to want to do is criticize any ideas that the Republican majority in the House comes forward with a budget, with a reasonable, sensible budget. They don't want to even talk about it. They would rather use it as a political tool for 2012. I think that is totally irresponsible.
Are you concerned at all, though, about the political fallout, maybe not for you, but for some of your colleagues, on saying we need to cut Medicare?
Well,
and the vote for Paul Ryan's budget?
Well, Greta, obviously the political fallout worries me. I mean, I feel my Republican Party has the best ideas in regard to running this country. I want us to keep the majority. I want us to get the win. But I feel it is more important to worry about the next generation than the next election. And I think each member of Congress needs to have that mindset firmly in place. And I really believe, especially with this new group of 87 freshman Republicans in the House of Representatives, that we do have that mindset.
One caller, we talked about this during the first 45 minutes, and one caller said, you know, I think last night's vote shows that there is room for compromise. And why not go back to the tax levels during the Bill Clinton era and also the spending cuts that were put in place during negotiations with Republicans back then and the Clinton administration. Could you agree to some sort of deal where that includes increases in tax revenue for spending cuts?
Well, the vote last night, obviously, on